Welcome to Fortune Forecasts. I am Daisy, your hostess, and you are in my book playlist, where we have been going through the book titled Secret of the Ages by Robert Collier, published in 1926. It is in the public domain. If you are new to my channel, welcome, and to our Fortune community, welcome back. There has been lots of nuggets throughout this book. We are heading now to Volume 6, Chapter 21, and each chapter was building up with more and more secret of the ages. So in this video, we will now start with Chapter 21, The Sculptor and the Clay. We start off with a quote by Alice Dayton. Eternal mind the potter is, and thought the eternal clay. The hand that fashions is divine, his works pass not away. God could not make imperfect man, his model infinite. Unhallowed thought he could not plan. Love's work and love must fit. When you step into your office on Monday morning, no doubt you have dreams of wonderful achievement. Your step is firm, your brain is clear, and you have carefully thought out just what you will do and how you will accomplish big things in your business. Perhaps the very plans you have in mind will influence your whole business career, and you have visions of the dollars that will be yours rolling into your bank account. But do these dreams come true? Are you always able to put through what you had planned to do? Does your day's work have the snap and power you imagined it would have? Are you ever forced to admit that your dreams of big accomplishment are often shattered because of fagged nerves and lack of energy, because you have not the pep? How easy it is to think back and see how success was in your grasp if only you had felt equal to that extra bit of effort. If only you had had the pep, the energy to reach out and take it. The great men of the world have been well men, strong men. Sickness and hesitancy go hand in hand. Sickness means weakness, querulousness, lack of faith, lack of confidence in oneself and in others. But there is no real reason for sickness or weakness, and there is no reason why you should remain weak or sick if you are so afflicted now. Remember the story of the sculptor Pygmalion? How he made a statue of marble so beautiful that every woman who saw it envied it. So perfect was it that he fell in love with it himself, hung it with flowers and jewels, day after day, in rapt admiration of it, until finally the gods took pity upon him and breathed into it the breath of life. There is more than pagan mythology to that story. There is this much truth in it, that any man can set before his mind's eye the image of the figure he himself would like to be, and then breathe the breath of life into it merely by keeping that image before his subconscious mind as the model onto which to do its daily building. For health and strength are natural. It is ill health and weakness that are unnatural. Your body was meant to be lithe, supple, muscular, full of red-blooded energy and vitality. A clear brain, a powerful heart, a massive chest, wrists and arms of steel. All these were meant for you. All these you can have if you will but know and feel and think aright. Just take stock of yourself for a moment. Are your muscles tough, springy, and full of vim? Do they do all you ask of them and then beg for more? Can you eat a good meal and forget it? If you can't, it's your own fault. You can have a body alive with vitality, a skin smooth and fine of texture, muscles supple and virile. You can be the man you have always dreamed of being, without arduous dieting, without tiresome series of exercises, merely by following the simple rules herein laid down. For what is it that builds up the muscles, puts energy and vitality into your system, gives you the pep and vigor of youth? Is it exercise? Then why is it that so many day laborers are poor, weak, anemic creatures forced to lay off from 1 to 3 months every year on account of sickness? They get plenty of exercise and fresh air. Why is it that so many athletes die of tuberculosis or weak hearts? They get the most scientific exercise year in and year out. Just the other day I read the sudden death of Martin A. Delaney, the famous trainer known all over the country as a physical director. He taught thousands how to be strong, but athletic heart killed him at 55. Passerby saw him running for a car, then suddenly topped over dead. Exercise as a panacea for all human ills is dangerously overrated. Dr. Charles M. Wharton, in charge of health and physical education at the University of Pennsylvania, said today, March 20th, 1926, according to an Associated Press dispatch. Dr. Wharton, who has been a trainer of men for 30 years and was an All-American guard on the Pennsylvania football team in 1895 and 1896, declared the search for the fountain of youth by exercise and diet has been commercialized to a point of hysteria. Someone should cry a halt against this wild scramble for health by unnatural means, said Dr. Wharton. This indiscriminate adoption of severe physical training destroys the health of more people than it improves. Dr. Wharton said he was appalled by the amount of physical defects and weaknesses developed by overindulgence in athletics by students in preparatory schools. I know I'm presenting an unpopular viewpoint, and it may sound strange coming from a physical director. In gymnasium work at the University of Pennsylvania, we try to place our young men in sports which they will enjoy, and thus get a physical stimulation from relaxed play. Is it diet? Then why is it that so many people, who have been dieting for years are still such poor, flabby creatures? Doesn't it always work, or is it merely a matter of guesswork, and those were the cases where no one happened to guess right? Why is it that doctors disagree so on what is the correct diet? For years, we have been taught to forswear too much meat. For years, we have been told that it causes rheumatism and gout and hardening of the arteries, and a dozen or more other ailments. Now comes Dr. Woods Hutchinson, a noted authority, quoted the world over, and says, all the silly old prejudice against meat, that it heated the blood, whatever that means, and produced uric acid to excess, hardened the arteries, inflamed the kidneys, caused rheumatism, etc., has now been proved to be pure fairy tales, utterly without foundation in scientific fact. Red meats have nothing whatever to do with causing gout and rheumatism, because neither of these diseases is due to foods or drinks of any sort, but solely to what we call local infections. Little pockets of pus, matter, full of robber germs, mostly streptococci, around the roots of our teeth, in the pouches of our tonsils, in the nasal passages and sinuses of our foreheads and faces opening into them. Our belief now is no pockets of pus, no rheumatism or gout. Food of any kind has absolutely nothing to do with the case. On the other hand, the very worst cases on record in all medical history of hardening and turning to lime, calcification of the arteries all over the body and in the kidneys and intestines particularly, have been found in Trappists and certain orders of Oriental monks who live almost exclusively upon starch and pulse, that is, peas, beans, and lentils, and abstain from meat entirely. Then what is right? Is it the combination of diet and exercise? But surely the patients in sanitariums and similar institutions would have every chance to get just the right combination, yet how often you see them come out little, if any, better off than when they went in? No, none of these is the answer. As a matter of fact, the principal good of either diet or exercise is that it keeps before the patient's mind the result he is working for, and in that way tends to impress it upon his subconscious mind. That is why physical culturists always urge you to exercise in front of a mirror. If results are achieved, it is mind that achieves them, not the movements you go through or the particular kind of food you eat. Understand, I don't ask you to stop exercising. A reasonable amount of light, pleasant exercise is good for you mentally and physically. It develops your willpower. It helps to impress upon your subconscious mind the image you want to see realized in your body. And it takes your mind off your troubles and worries, centering your thoughts instead upon your desires. Just where your thoughts should always be. Outdoor exercise, tennis, horseback swimming, any sort of active game is the best rest there is for a tired mind. For mental tiredness comes from a too steady contemplation of one's problems. And anything that will take one's mind completely off them and give the subconscious time to work out the solution is good. That is why it so often happens that you go back to your work after a day of play, not merely refreshed, but with so clear a mind that the problems which before seemed insurmountable are but as child's play to you. You who envy the rosy cheek and sparkling eye of youth, who awake in the morning weary and unfreshed, who go to your daily task with fagged brain and heavy tread, just remember that perfect youth or perfect health is merely a state of mind. There's only one thing that puts muscle on your bones. There is only one thing that keeps your organs functioning with precision and regularity. There is only one thing that builds you a perfect body. That one thing is your subconscious mind. Every cell and tissue, every bone and sinew, every organ and muscle in your entire body is subject to the control of your subconscious mind. As it directs, so they build or function. True, that subconscious mind accepts suggestions from your conscious mind. Hold before it the thought that the exercise you are taking is building muscle upon your arms or shoulders, and your subconscious mind will fall in readily with the suggestion and strengthen those muscles. Hold before it the thought that some particular food gives you unusual energy and pep, and the subconscious mind will be entirely agreeable to producing the added vigor. But have you ever noticed how some sudden joy, which is entirely a mental state, energizes and revitalizes you, all the exercise or all the tonics you can take? Have you ever noticed how martial music will relieve the fatigue of marching men? Have you ever noticed how sorrow, which is entirely a mental state, will depress and devitalize you, regardless of any amount of exercise or health foods you may take? Each of us has within him all the essentials that go to the making of a Superman. But so has every acorn the essentials for making a great oak tree. Yet the Japanese show us that even an oak may be stunted by continual pruning of its shoots. Negative and weak thoughts, thoughts of self-doubt, of mistrust, continually prune back the vigorous life ever seeking so valiantly to show forth the splendor and strength of the radiant inner self. Choose what you will be. Your responsibility is to think, speak, act the true inner self. Your privilege is to show forth in this self the fullness of peace and plenty. Keep steadfastly in mind the idea of yourself that you want to see realized. Your daily, hourly, and continual idea of yourself, your life, your affairs, your world, and your associates determines the harvest, the showing forth. Look steadfastly to your highest ideal of self, and your steadfast and lofty ideal will draw forth blessing and prosperity not only upon you, but upon all who know you. For mind is the only creator, and thought is the only energy. All that counts is the image of your body that you are holding in your thought. If heretofore that image has been one of weakness, of ill health, change it now, today. Repeat to yourself, the first thing upon awakening in the morning and the last thing before going to sleep at night. My body was made in the image and likeness of God. God first imagined it in its entirety. Therefore, every cell and bone and tissue is perfect, every organ and muscle performing its proper function. That is the only model of me in universal. That is the only model of me that my subconscious mind knows. Therefore, since mind, God, is the only creator, that is the only model of me that I can have. End of chapter 21. Stay right here with me. We're going to roll on to the next chapter. Make sure that you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with your friends. Let's be part of the reason why our human race keeps improving. All right, on to Volume 6, Chapter 22. Why grow old? And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. Remember how you used to plow through great masses of work day after day and month after month, cheerily, enthusiastically, with never a sign of tiring or nervous strain? Remember how you used to enjoy those evenings, starting out as fresh from your office or shop as if you hadn't just put a hard day's work behind you? No doubt, you've often wondered why you can't work and enjoy yourself like that now, but solaced yourself with the month-eaten fallacy that, as a man grows older, he shouldn't expect to get the same fun out of life that he did in his earlier years. Poor old exploded idea. Youth is not a matter of time. It is a mental state. You can be just as brisk, just as active, just as lighthearted now as you were 10 or 20 years ago. Genuine youth is just a perfect state of health. You can have that health and the boundless energy and capacity for work or enjoyment that go with it. You can cheat time of 10, 20, or 50 years, not by taking thought of what you shall eat or what you shall drink, not by diet or exercise, but solely through a right understanding of what you should expect out of your body. If only I had my life to live over again, how often you have heard it said, how often you have thought it. But the fact is that you can have it. You can start right now and live again as many years as you have already experienced. Health, physical freedom, and full vigor need not end for you at 35 or 40, nor at 60 or 70. Age is not a matter of years. It is a state of mind. In an address before the American Sociological Society a few months ago, Dr. Hornell Hart of Bryn Mawr predicted that babies born in the year 2000 will have something like 200 years of life ahead of them, and men and women of 100 years will be quite the normal thing. But instead of being wrinkled and crippled, centenarians will be in their vigorous prime. Thomas Parr, an Englishman, lived to be 152 years old and was sufficiently hale and hearty at the age of 120 to take unto himself a second wife. Even at 152, his death was not due to old age, but to a sudden and drastic change in his manner of life. All his days he had lived upon simple fare, but his fame reaching the king, he was invited to London and there feasted so lavishly that he died of it. In a dispatch to the New York Times on February 14th last, I read of an Arab now in Palestine, one Salah Mustafa Salah Abu Musa, who, at the age of 105, is growing his third set of teeth. There is an ancient city in Italy which can be approached by sea only through a long stretch of shallow water full of rocks and cross currents. There is one safe channel, and it is marked by posts. In the days of the sea rovers, the city used to protect itself by pulling up the posts whenever a rover hove in sight. Mankind has taken to planting posts along its way to mark the flight of time. Every year we put in a new one, heedless of the fact that we are thus marking a clear channel for our arch enemy, age to enter in from the sea of human belief. But the fact is that there is no natural reason for man to grow old as soon as he does, no biological reason for him to grow old at all. Why is it that the animals live 8 to 10 times their maturity when man lives only about twice his? Why? Because man hastens decrepitude and decay by holding the thought of old age always before him. Dr. Alexis Carrel, Nobel Prize winner and member of the Rockefeller Institute, has demonstrated that living cells taken from a body properly protected and fed can be kept alive indefinitely. Not only that, but they grow. In 1912, he took some tissue from the heart of an embryo chick and placed it in a culture medium. It is living and growing yet. Recently, Dr. Carrel showed a moving picture of these living cells before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. They grow so fast that they double in size every 24 hours and have to be trimmed daily. The cells of your being can be made to live indefinitely when placed outside your body. Single-celled animals never die a natural death. They live on and on until something kills them. Now scientists are beginning to wonder if multicellular animals like man really need to die. Under the title Immortality and Rejuvenation in Modern Biology, M. Mentelnikov of the Pasteur Institute has just published a volume that should be read by all those who have decided that it is necessary to grow old and die. Here is the first sentence of the concluding chapter of the book. What we have just written forces us to maintain our conviction that immortality is the fundamental property of living organisms. And further on, old age and death are not a stage of earthly existence. And that, mind you, is set forth under the aegis of a scientific establishment that has no equal in the world and of a scholar universally respected. As the Journal of Paris says in reviewing the article, most religious and philosophic systems assert the immortality of the soul, but the positive sciences have shown themselves more skeptical on this point. This idea seems to them quite contradictory to all that we know or think we know of animal life. Animal life originates as a tiny germ which becomes an embryo, developing into an adult organism which grows old and finally dies. This means the disappearance of all the faculties of life that so clearly distinguish it from an inanimate object. There is no scientific evidence to show that at this moment the soul does not disappear with the body and that it continues its existence separately. Biologists cannot even conceive the possibility of separation of soul and body. So strong and indissoluble are the bonds that unite all our psychic manifestations with our bodily life. For them, an immortal soul can only exist in an immortal body. What if it were so? What if our organism is really indestructible? It is this that M. Mentelnikov attempts scientifically to prove. Death is a permanent and tangible phenomenon only in the case of man and the higher animals. It is not so for plants and for the simpler forms of animal life, the protozoans. These last, composed often of a single cell, just observable under the microscope, are, however, without the chief faculties that characterize the higher animals. They move about by means of vibratory, hair-like processes, sustain themselves, seek their food, hunt animals still smaller than themselves, react to irritations of different kinds, and multiply. But this multiplication is not effected by means of special organs, as among the higher animals, but by the division of the whole organism into two equal parts. The common infusoria which abound in fresh water thus divide once or twice every 24 hours. Each daughter cell continues to live like the mother cell, of which it is the issue. It feeds, grows, and divides in its turn, and never in this constantly renewed cycle in their lives do we find the phenomenon of natural death. so characteristic and so universal in the higher animals. The infusorium is subject only to the accidental death, such as we can cause by the addition of some poisonous element to the water in which it lives, or by heat. Experiments along this line were made long ago. The first were by de Saussure in 1679. Having put an infusorium in a drop of water, he saw it divide under his eye. 4 days later, it was impossible to count the number of creatures. However, some authors thought that this reproductive facility was not unlimited. Malpas himself, who made a minute study of it for 40 years ago and succeeded in observing 700 successive generations of a single species, thought that it was finally subject to old age and to death. But the more recent works of Jakovsky at Heidelberg, of Kolofin at Petrograd, of Calkins in England, of Wiseman, and still others, lead to an opposite opinion. The degeneration observed by these workers was due to auto-intoxication, caused by not renewing the culture medium. Decisive experiments were made in Russia, dating from 1907, by Woodruff and by M. Metelnikov himself. Begun at Tsarskoye Selo, they continued until the tragic hours of the 1917 revolution and were renewed at the University of Crimea. These investigators took an infusorium found in an aquarium, the Paramecium caratum, whose characteristics are well determined, and in 13 years in 1920 they had obtained 5,000 successive generations. Thus, we are bound to say that a unicellular body possesses within itself the power of immortality, and we ourselves are made up only by the juxtaposition of simple cells. The Fountain of Youth. 400 years ago, Ponce de Leon set sail into the mysteries of an unknown world in search of the Fountain of Youth, when all the time the secret of that fountain was right within himself. For the fact is that no matter how many years have passed since you were born, you are only 11 months old today. Your body is constantly renewing itself. The one thing about it you can be surest of is change. Every one of the millions of cells of which it is composed is constantly being renewed. Even your bones are daily renewing themselves in this way. These cells are building. Every day they tear down old tissue and rebuild it with new. There is not a cell in your body, not a muscle or tissue, not a bone, that is more than 11 months old. Why then should you feel age? Why should you be any less spry, any less cheerful than these youngsters around you that you have been envying? The answer is that you need not, if you will but realize your youthfulness. Every organ, every muscle, tissue, and cell of your body is subject to your subconscious mind. They rebuild exactly as that mind directs them. What is the model you are holding before your mind's eye? Is it one of age, of decrepitude? That is the model that most men use because they know no better. That is the result that you see imaged upon their bodies. But you need not follow their outworn models. You can hold before your mind's eye only the vision of youth, of manly vigor, of energy and strength and beauty. And that is the model that your cells will use to build upon. Do you know what is responsible for the whole difference between youth and age? Just one thing. Youth looks forward always to something better. Age looks backward and sighs over its lost youth. In youth, we're constantly growing. We know we have not yet reached our prime. We know we can expand to continually improve. We look forward to ever-increasing physical powers. We look forward to a finer, more perfect physique. We look forward to greater mental alertness. We have been educated to expect these things. Therefore, we believe we shall get them, and we get them. But what happens after we get to be 30 or 40 years of age? We think we have reached our prime. We have been taught that we can no longer look forward to greater youth, that all we can hope for is to hold our own for a little while and then start swiftly downward to old age and decay. History shows that no nation, no institution, and no individual can continue for any length of time to merely hold his own. You must go forward or back. You must move or life will pass you by. Yours is the choice. If you will realize that there is never any end to growth, that your body is constantly being rebuilt, that perfection is still so far ahead of you that you can continue growing towards it indefinitely. You need never know age. You can keep on growing more perfect mentally and physically every day. Every minute you live is a minute of conception and rebirth. You may be weak and anemic. You may be crippled or bent. No matter. You can start today to rebuild along new lines. In 11 months, at the most, every one of these weak and devitalized cells, every one of those bent and crippled bones, will be replaced by new, strong, vigorous tissue. Look at Annette Kellerman, crippled and deformed as a child, yet she grew up into the world's most perfectly formed woman. Look at Roosevelt, weak and anemic as a young man, yet he made himself the envy of the world for boundless vigor and energy. And they are but 2 cases out of thousands I could quote. Many of the world's strongest men were weaklings in their childhood. It matters not what your age, what your condition. You can start now renewing your youth, growing daily nearer the model of you that is imaged in universal mind. Arthur Brisbane says that at the age of 85, George F. Baker is doing the work of 10 men. That is what every man of 85 ought to be doing, for he should have not only the physical vigor and strength and enthusiasm of 21, but combined with them, he should have the skill and experience, the ripened judgment of 85. There is no more despairing pronouncement than the belief of the average man that he matures only to begin at once to deteriorate and decay, when the actual fact is, as stated in a recent utterance by the eminent Dr. Hammond, there is no physiological reason why a man should die. He asserted, and the statement is corroborated by scientists and physiologists, that the human body possesses inherent capacity to renew and continue itself and its functions indefinitely. Your body wear out? Of course it does, just as all material things do. But with this difference, your body is being renewed just as fast as it wears out. Have you damaged some part of it? Don't worry. Down inside you is a chemical laboratory which can make new part just as good or better than the old. Up in your subconscious mind is a master chemist with all the formulas of the universal mind to draw upon, who can keep that chemical laboratory of yours making new parts just as fast as you can wear out the old. But the master chemist is like all of us, like you. He is inclined to lazy a bit on the job if you let him. Try to relieve him of some of his functions and he won't bother about them further. Take to the regular use of drugs or other methods of eliminating the waste matter from the body, and your master chemist will figure that your conscious mind has taken over this duty from him, and will leave it thereafter to your conscious mind. Lead him to believe that you no longer expect him to rebuild your body along such perfect lines as in youth, and he will slow down in his work of removing the old, worn-out tissues and of replacing them with new, better material. The result? Arteries clogged with worn-out cells, tissues dried and shrunken, joints stiff and creaky. In short, old age. The fault is not with the master chemist, it is with you. You didn't hold him to the job. When a business or enterprise or an expedition fails, it is not the rank and file who are to blame. It is the directing head. He didn't give his men the right plans to work on. He didn't supply the proper leadership. He didn't keep them keyed up to their best work. What would you think of an engineer who, with the best plans in the world, the best material with which to build, threw away his plan when he was half through with the job and let his men do as they pleased, ruining all his early work and all his fine material by putting the rest of it together any which way. Yet, that is what you do when you stop looking forward at age 30 or 40 and decide thereafter to just grow old any which way. You throw away the wonderful model on which you have been building. You take the finest material in the world and let your workmen put it together any way they like. In fact, you do worse than that. You tell them you don't expect much from them anymore, that any sort of a patched-up job they put together after that will be about as good as you can look for. Man alive! What would you expect from ordinary workmen to whom you talked like that? Your inner workmen are no different. You will get from them just what you look for. No more, no less. Your time of life should be the best time you have yet known. The engineer who has built 40 bridges should be far more proficient than the one who has built only a few. The model you are passing on to your master chemist now ought to be a vastly more perfect model than the one you gave him at 20. Instead of feeling that your heart is giving out and your stomach weak, you ought to be boasting of how much better a heart you are now, making than a few years ago how much more perfectly your stomach is functioning than before you learned that you were its boss. Of one thing you can be sure: God never decreed a law of decay and death. If there is any such law, it is man-made, and man can unmake it. The life principle that came to this planet thousands or millions of years ago brought no death principle with it. For death is like darkness. It is nothing in itself. Death is merely the absence of life, just as darkness is merely the absence of light. Keep that life surging strongly. In the Book of Wisdom of the Apocryphal Writings, you read, "For God made not death, neither hath he pleasure in the destruction of the living. For he created all things that they might have being, and the generative powers of the world are healthsome, and there is no poison of destruction in them, nor hath death dominion upon the earth. For righteous is immortal. But ungodly men with their works and words call death unto them. For God created man to be immortal, and made him to be an image of his own proper being. But by the envy of the devil came death into the world. Whosoever liveth and believeth in me, understandeth me, said Jesus, shall never die. And again, if a man keep my saying, he shall never see death." Universal mind knows no imperfection, no decay, no death. It does not produce sickness and death. It is your conscious mind that has decreed these evils. Banish the thought, and you can banish the effect. Life was never meant to be measured by years. I remember reading a story of a traveler who had journeyed to a land of perpetual sun. Since there was no sunrise and no sunset, no moons or changing seasons, there was no means of measuring time. Therefore, to the inhabitants of that land, time did not exist. And having no time, they never thought to measure ages and consequently never grew old. Like organisms with a single cell, they did not die except by violence. There is more truth than fiction to that idea. The measurement of life by the calendar robs youth of its vigor and hastens old age. It reminds me of the days of our grandparents, when a woman was supposed to doll her hat and don a bonnet at 40. And donning a bonnet was like taking the veil. She was supposed to retire to her chimney corner and make way for the younger generation. Men and women ought to grow with years into greater health, broader judgment, maturer wisdom. Instead of becoming atrophied and dead to all new ideas, their minds should, through practice, hold ever stronger images before them of youthful vigor and freshness. The psalmist says, "But thou art the same, and thy years shall have no end. No one need retire to the chimney corner, no matter how many years have passed over his head. Years should bring wisdom and greater health, not decrepitude. Many of the world's famous men did their greatest work long after the age when most men are in their graves. Tennyson composed the immortal lines of Crossing the Bar at the age of 80. Plato still had pen in hand at 81. Cato learned Greek at the same age. Humboldt completed his Cosmos in his 90th year, while John Wesley at 82 said, "It is 12 years now since I have felt any such sensation as fatigue." You are only as old as your mind. Every function, every activity of your body is controlled by your mind. Your vital organs, your blood that sends the material for rebuilding to every cell and tissue, the processes of elimination that remove all the broken down and waste material, all are dependent for their functioning upon the energy derived from your mind. The human body can be compared to an electric transportation system. When the dynamo runs at full power, every car speeds along, and everything is handled with precision. But let the dynamo slow down, and the whole system lags. That dynamo is your mind, and your thoughts provide the energy that runs it. Feed it thoughts of health and vigor, and your whole system will reflect energy and vitality. Feed it thoughts of decrepitude and age, and you will find it slowing down to the halting pace you set for it. You can grow old at 30. You can be young at 90. It is up to you. Which do you choose? If you choose youth, then start this minute renewing your youth. Find a picture, or better still, a statuette of the man you would like to be, the form you would like to have. Keep it in your room. When you go to bed at night, visualize it in your mind's eye. Hold it in your thoughts as you, as the man you are going to be. The Journal of Education had the idea in their story of The Prince and the Statue in a recent issue. There was once a prince who had a crooked back. He could never stand straight up like even the lowest of his subjects. Because he was a very proud prince, his crooked back caused him a great deal of mental suffering. One day he called before him the most skillful sculptor in his kingdom and said to him, "Make me a noble statue of myself, true to my likeness in every detail, with this exception. Make this statue with a straight back. I wish to see myself as I might have been." For long months, the sculptor worked hewing the marble carefully into the likeness of the prince. And at last the work was done, and the sculptor went before the prince and said, "The statue is finished. Where shall I set it up?" One of the courtiers called out, "Set it before the castle gate where all can see it." But the prince smiled sadly and shook his head. "Rather," said he, "place it in a secret nook in the palace garden where only I shall see it." The statue was placed as the prince ordered and promptly forgotten by the world. But every morning and every noon and every evening the prince stole quietly away to where it stood and looked long upon it, noting the straight back and the unlifted head and the noble brow. And each time he gazed, something seemed to go out of the statue and into him, tingling in his blood and throbbing in his heart. The days passed into months, and the months into years. Then strange rumors began to spread throughout the land. Said one, "The prince's back is no longer crooked, or my eyes deceive me." Said another, "The prince is more noble looking, or my eyes deceive me." Said another, "Our prince has the high look of a mighty man." And these rumors came to the prince, and he listened with a queer smile. Then went he out into the garden to where the statue stood, and, behold, it was just as the people said. His back had become as straight as the statue's. His head had the same noble bearing. He was, in fact, the noble man his statue proclaimed him to be. A novel idea? Not at all. 2,500 years ago, in the golden age of Athens, when its culture led the world, Grecian mothers surrounded themselves with beautiful statues that they might bring forth perfect children, and that the children in turn might develop into perfect men and women. 11 months from now, you will have an entirely new body, inside and out. Not a single cell, not a single bit of tissue that is now in you will be there then. What changes do you want made in that new body? What improvements? Get your new model clearly in your mind's eye. Picture it, visualize it, look forward daily with a better physique to greater mental power. Give that model to your subconscious mind to build upon, and before 11 months are out, that model will be you. End of chapter 22. All right, I'm glad you're following along, and hit that like button. The YouTube algorithm will keep me out here and reaching more people that might need this type of information. So I really appreciate it. Let's move over now to the next video, where I will be there with Volume 7, Chapter 23, The Medicine Delusion.